I'm Claude Smith Jr., and I was employed by Clinton in 1974. And I was given the job when I first started as working with the 4-H program, but eventually when the Master Gardener program came along, I started working with it, and I worked with it pretty much the entire time until I turned it over to Corey Tanner. It was a nationwide program, basically started out in Oregon, and our Clemson University being a land-grant college, and that's where they had most of these type programs. And they picked it up and said, well, okay, we're gonna try to do this in South Carolina. And we had, of course, you got extension offices in all 46 counties, so we had pretty much Master Gardener programs in those counties. And the biggest part of it was we put it on a trial basis. They done it in all the counties. And that was just to see how it ran. You know, if it was gonna be easy to do. The key to it was volunteers. If we were gonna do the training, get volunteers out of that training that would come and work in the office to help us with the volume of calls that we got in the office. The Piedmont Master Gardener Association name was because we were in the Piedmont area of South Carolina. Because the extension service was divided into the different areas, Piedmont, PD, Midlands, you know, they had it divided like that. So that's why it just became Piedmont Master Gardener Association, because it was in the Piedmont of South Carolina, that area. But we decided to have a Master Gardener display for people to see things, flowers and all that. We had Master Gardener out to answer questions, but they forgot with all the displays that, you know, they had peacocks running around loose, and the peacocks saw all these fancy flowers and stuff, and they just started migrating toward those. So we had to get the curator at the time to come and get the peacocks out the way and leave these flowers alone.
Where was this?
It was at the Greenville Zoo. Greenville Zoo. Mm-hmm.
And what did the Master Gardeners, the Master Gardener volunteers, do you remember what they did, what they were involved with, and who were the Master Gardener adventurers?
Yeah, well, for the exhibits, they were there to answer questions for walk-in clientele to the zoo. They just kind of opened the zoo up and say, okay, we got this exhibit, y'all come through and look at it. And then they had Master Gardeners there to answer questions, take soil samples, that type of thing.
And what else did they do in the community at this time?
That was still a regular Master Gardener program. Now the Master Gardener Adventures was a splinter group. They did not want to do these master things that the Master Gardener program wanted to do. They wanted to do little projects. And they said, we go to this little place and do this little project and get it done, and we through. They weren't obligated any more than that. And they enjoyed doing it. And, you know, everything that was done, it's just like, Claude, what you think about it? Fine, do it. You fine, no problem. So that's how it worked. It was management of the program, and they used to laugh at me because I just say, well, you know, I have an open door policy. You can come in and talk to me at any time about anything, but I may not pay you any attention. And they just kind of laughed. And like, they said, well, you have that kind of personality. I said, sure. And thinking about funny things that happened. One, you know, they accused me of really trying to flunk all of them with the final exam. So I was like Well, the questions come from everything that we've gone through. I'll never forget one lady that was in one of the classes. She had given her kids a hard time about doing their lessons and passing tests. And when she got in the Master Gardener program, she said, "You mean I got to pass these tests?" Yes, you got to pass, and you got to pass the final exam. Well, when we took the final exam, I think the next day after that, she came to my office, and I mean, she was just boo-hooing, and I just like, what in the world is wrong? Well, I didn't pass, and I can't go home and tell my kids I didn't pass that test, because they say, "Mama, you better pass that test." So I said, "Look, I'll revamp the test, let you take it, and you pass it, then you can go home and tell your kids you pass it." And that's what I done.
Give her a Kleenex.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That was funny. They changed it because they didn't like the Piedmont Master Garden. They wanted to be more target specific to Greenville, so they named it Greater Greenville. And that was fine because, people kind of, when they heard Piedmont Master Gardeners, they weren't sure what that was. When they heard Greater Greenville, it made no sense. So that was the main reason for changing it.
And how were people chosen for the classes?
Initially, when we started, it was, basically kind of first come, first served. And we got the classes built, but the list got so large. And it was like, I'm not gonna make that decision to kick somebody out. In other words, it was by word of mouth. So you had a lot of neighbors, friends, and I was just like, I'm not gonna let this person over their friend and have to deal with that. So we just had the list. You sign up, get on the list, and we take so many per year, and we just went through the list, and the list got massive. I mean, but that's the only way that I felt like I could do it. Now, when the association started to pound it, then they said, "Well, we can weed them out." I said, fine, y'all weed them out and get it down to, a decent level. I pretty much think at the time I probably trained all of the workers at Greenville County. I made them. I just like, y'all out doing these jobs, and you just do it because it is a job. But you need to do it as a responsible person that knows what they're doing. So that caught on pretty good. I got a little flack from people that want to be in the pro, and they say, "Well, you got these slots taken up by these people." Well, don't worry about it. It'll work out.
My name is Marion St. Clair. I became a Master Gardener in Lexington County in 1994. In time, I became president of the Lexington County Association, and later president of the Midlands Master Gardener Association. When I did the training in the Midlands area of South Carolina, 4 counties did their training together. So it was Lexington, as well as Richland, Kershaw, and Fairfield. And each county was allowed to have 15 students. So our class of Master Gardener trainees included 60 people. And it was very exciting and a lot of fun. And some of my best friends for many, many years have all been from that early group of Master Gardeners.
My name is Susie Seagrave. I became a Master Gardener in 2001, moved here from Connecticut, went from gardening basically not at all to spending 365 days in the outdoors. I was a co-chair of Project Host Soup Kitchen, which I started as soon as I finished taking my classes. But I have a little history of the soup kitchen for those of you, as it does not exist as a Master Gardener project any longer might be interested in knowing about. Carol McLaren, who became a Master Gardener in 1998, and a friend of hers, Chris Burton, also became a Master Gardener around that time, and they both were nurses at St. Francis Hospital. They got St. Francis involved with the Project Toast soup kitchen, which existed, of course, and a garden was started there. In 1999, the garden itself came under the auspices of the Master Gardeners, and it was 1,533 square feet of garden in raised beds and also just in open ground. So Chris and Carol were the first coordinators of the garden, and people like myself who had taken the class and needed to make hours could work. And also it was at that time, and it was till the day it disappeared, the only project that was on a weekend, which meant it was the only project, if you had a 9-to-5 job, that you could possibly work at. And to the best of my knowledge, even today, we don't have such a project. The first description in our catalog was we were supporting Project Toast Kitchen Garden with leadership and volunteer work and training for every third Saturday. So 12 Saturdays a year, we were down at Project Toast, rain or shine, snow or sleet, 108-degree temperatures. We were there in the morning to work at Project Toast. We were also, our personal goals were to provide fresh, nutritious, seasonal vegetables to the soup kitchen to be made into food to serve the people that came there. We harvested the vegetables on the weekends that we worked there, but during the work weeks, because again, we were only there one weekend a month, the people who worked in the soup kitchen just simply went out the back door and picked whatever they wanted to. And that was in 2001. In 2002, I became an official co-chair with Carol McLaren, and I received what I should say was incredibly intensive amount of education as to how the garden was run. You know, we had to work with the person who ran the soup kitchen so that she could tell us what and approximately how many vegetables of all the different kinds that there were that she required for her chefs. And they had, at that time, a lot of turnovers in chefs. So she may tell us that she wanted, 100 tomato plants, and because they were going to make a lot of tomato-based, it's a very versatile vegetable, so they were going to, and then 6 months later, there'd be a new chef who didn't even work with tomatoes. So we had to be very careful and work with her very carefully as far as how much she wanted. We talked about tools and fertilizers. We talked about how to pre-plan for once a month what we could do most efficiently to get it done. We did plan on an average of 75 tomato plants, probably 100 pepper plants, and half a dozen different kinds. And to give you an idea, in raised beds, we would plant on average 300 square feet of just lettuce. So there were significant quantities. It was a commercial garden. It wasn't like your little garden at home. We talked a lot about budgeting and also vendor support. We were very fortunate to have the support of Fafford, who provided us every year with bag upon bag of soil. We also work with Landscaper Supply, Lowe's and Home Depot, and Bonnie Plants originally back in early 2000s donated all the vegetable plants, every single one of them. And that was a great savings to us because our budget was, in line with other project budgets, but we had big expenditures.
I'm Deborah Schneider. I've been a Master Gardener since 1994, the best of my recollection. I've been involved in, I think, pretty much every aspect of the organization through the years. The symposiums, the plant sales, the garden tours, and have greatly enjoyed being a part of this organization.
I'm Terry Gentry. I've been a Master Gardener since 1990, and I have a very scratchy throat today. I don't usually talk like this. As long as with Deborah, I have been involved with the plant sales symposiums. I think I've held every office except treasurer. You shouldn't trust me with money. And It's a great organization. It's a little sad we haven't kept better notes since all our memories are failing.
Alrighty.
I'm Ellen Weinberg, and I've been a Master Gardener since 1996. And I was president when we did the first symposium in Greenville. And I've enjoyed being a part of this organization for many years. I've been involved in a lot of different aspects over the years, and it's just been a wonderful group to be a part of.
Hetty Dreskin, I've been a Master Gardener since 1995. Ellen Weinberg has always pushed me into things. I'm not a joiner. I'm not a group person. This has been the most wonderful organization with which I've ever been involved, because there is nothing like gardeners who give and allow a lot of leeway in behavior.
So Phoebe Blackston said you were called
Piedmont something?
the Master Gardener Adventurers
Yeah.
and also the Piedmont Master Gardeners.
Yeah.
And I want to know what was different before.
Nothing. We had meetings in people's homes, and it was not a certain day, let's get together and talk about this or whatever. And you might have had 8 or 10.
Really?
I do remember, though, maybe when I came along, several of the meetings were at the extension office.
Yeah.
And I do remember one fun thing: you had to wear your badge, and if you didn't, you had to put a quarter in the kitty, which bought I don't know what, but that was kind of a rule.
Mm-hmm.
And there were maybe 6 or 7 that met, and at that point, I don't remember a lot of projects or events.
The first real project, other than, I guess, garden tours or projects and whatever, was Project Host.
Susie Seagrave was the spearhead person for that project, and she was so organized, kept perfect notes, how many things were harvested this day or that day. I mean, she was in it hook, line, and sinker. She was all about it.
I don't know when the Christmas party started, but I do remember one year at my house, we had 100 and something people at the Christmas parties, and that's when we decided that we had to move to another location. So we moved to Spalding Farms Clubhouse for a lot of years, several years, because we were too big.
The children's garden was completed in 2005 by the committee, the powers that be, and the city of Greenville.
It was done by a leadership Greenville class.
It sure was.
This was young people who the city is training to take on. And they took on the project and then said, oh, what are we going to do with it now? And we were kind of asked to take it on.
We were. We were.
Yeah, but then there was a lot of turmoil, and it did not get passed.
It did not, correct. We had to write up a proposal, and our mission, the focus, et cetera, et cetera. Our purpose was to assist the city. They did all the mow and the blow, and the garden was totally installed by 2005. And we were asked by them to tweak it, handle the changing out of the annuals, doing some extra pruning. But the main thing that we wanted to do was have another location to educate the public about gardening. And that we used the children's garden, and we contacted different elementary schools. We learned their curriculums as far as what, in other words, what age group would best match our program, and we determined it was first graders. And I had a connection to Sarah Collins because my daughter-in-law teaches there, and from that point on, we've had 150 Sarah Collins kids come through every year except for COVID.
And that was in 2007 and 8.
Yep.
That
Continued
period.
on. We picked up Stone Academy. We picked up some Girl Scout groups, church groups, Slater Marietta, and other groups along the way.
And then we did some homeschool groups.
Yes, we did. It really was very successful. But so there were kind of two sides to our equation, the maintenance part and the education part. And that's how that all came.
Alice.
No, the other Helen. Chandler. Came from California, where she had been instrumental in implementing an herb garden, and I forget which city. But it was this huge, and I had seen it because we had been in, I want to say San Francisco, but I don't think it was. But anyway, there was this beautiful hillside of herbs, and then she relocated to Greenville for, I think, family and health reasons, and decided that she was going to go do something wonderful at Roper Mountain. And Helen Ellis had sort of always been there because she was the history garden. She was that with her wonderful crocheted little neck piece. And she, with the little house and the heirloom stuff. And so that's how that all happened, and it was, I think it was in place when you were president, and possibly before that.
Because I remember going to meet with Daryl Harrison, who was the executive director of Roper Mountain Science Center, and Phoebe and I visited with him about the butterfly garden. And Phoebe's husband had installed all the irrigation there for it. I really can't remember exactly why we were meeting with Daryl. I'm sorry, I can't remember why we were.
The Master Gardeners were already involved with the butterfly
They were
garden?
already involved with the butterfly garden. I don't believe this was when I was president. Well, it must have been when I was president.
And Ginger was
And Ginger Kopka was in charge of the butterfly
Right.
garden.
For many years.
For years and years until
Yes,
Corey
for
said
many
stop.
years. In the beginning, that first symposium, we just sent people out to go find lunch somewhere, be back at a certain time.
Because we had no,
That way to provide that.
the first couple of years.
Yes, that was at
Greenville
Greenville
Tech.
Tech.
And then we go from there to Furman. And then Furman provided the lunches for us
Yeah.
when we were there.
And we were there at least 2 years.
The reason why we left Tech was because we outgrew them, correct?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
reason
we
we
outgrew
left Furman
Yeah.
is we outgrew it. Could I say how many people were there? I don't know what the capacity of.
We were at about the 200 or so level, I think. I mean, we didn't have that number at Greenville Tech because we were just beginning, and we had to fight with the football season, which is why we moved it to the winter. And then we had about a 200 and maybe 250.
I don't think we had 200 at Furman. I don't know.
I don't, it was just one big room and it was very crowded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a few vendors, but they were in a
Three.
hall.
Yeah.
The three. I helped with Linda Cunningham the first year, and there were three.
And then we had a I don't know, schlock table, whatever you want, just stuff that you could buy or not. And that was part of that. That was the part of that at Furman as well. And then it just started to snowball, and we moved. And then, when it started getting up to the 300 and 400 and 500 numbers, it was like actually do this? Is this just too wholesale? But it seems to have been very successful.
When did the art start?
The art started the year we needed to have something that would be on the cover, and I thought that it would be good if we helped a local artist, so that was 2005, and Lynn Greer, a local artist, was contracted, and I think we paid her $300 for the artwork, and that was, and then we raffled it, and I think we've made money on the raffle every year.
Yeah.
I think probably now we make a significant amount of money.
And at this point, we have an art sponsor. We started that
Yeah.
several years
Yeah.
ago. Proven Winners is sponsoring us this year
For the art.
for the art.
Awesome.
$500.
It really didn't start as Ask a Master Gardener. It just started as having a table to give out information. You know, you had somebody sitting there, somebody would come along, and that was going on for a long period of time, and then it kind of got a name.
Well, it was at the plants, the things
Home
that,
and garden show.
the home and garden, but also at the big
The farmer's market
farm. Thank you,
special
that's the word.
festivals.
Farmers market on
And
Oak
Lowe's
Road.
Depot.
Yeah.
We had
Yeah.
tables.
And we actually did some at either Home Depot or Lowe's in Greer, because there was a guy who was an employee there who was a master gardener for a minute. Who's
Danny.
Danny, yeah.
Danny.
I'm Evelyn Onofrio, and I became a master gardener in 2001. And I took the class under Claude Smith, and I took the night class back then. And so I was a volunteer that did all my volunteer work usually on weekends. And so when I started volunteering at the Heritage Garden, I don't know, in 2004, 2005, 2006, that was one of the few places for working people that you could get your volunteer hours in. So I was happy to go out there on Saturdays and second Saturdays and spend some time with the two Helens, who basically were kind of running the Heritage Garden and the herb garden out there at that time. And they were both such amazing women. Helen Ellis she did the Heritage Garden, and she was 80 at the time. And Helen Chandler was over the herb garden, and she was 75. And so here's these two, older women, and we're just, running around the Living History Farm, talking about herbs and talking about vegetables and herbs that the people that lived in the 1830s, and that was what the Living History Farm was about, settlers that lived in the 1830s, and what they would raise for food, what they would raise for, to feed their livestock, and other plants that they would use for dyeing their clothes, or insect repellent, and all sorts of things, making soaps and and candles and all sorts of things. And so they were just two wonderful women who were so unique and fun to be around and inspirational at the same time. Helen Chandler, who was over the herb garden, she was one of the first people that worked in there and helped establish it and design it. And she was one of these women that had transplanted to Greenville because she had family in the area, but she had spent her working life traveling the world, and she worked for the government and did programs for third world countries. And so she had all sorts of interesting information and tidbits about
how other people in other parts of the world lived. And so she just brought a real wealth of information and knowledge about herbs and how you would use them in cooking, how you would use them in all sorts of other ways like dyes and medicinal, even though, you know, we weren't modern day, you didn't use plants necessarily for medicinal purposes, but she just had a lot of information about that. And she was more of a quiet woman and reserved, but once she started talking about herbs, she just became this really animated person. And if you were ever there on a second Saturday and you were in the herb garden, Helen usually had a little crowd of people that would follow her all over that garden, and they would just learn a whole lot of stuff about herbs and how to use them and how to grow them. And then if you went into the Heritage Garden with Helen Ellis, you could easily see Helen Ellis, 80 years old, with a wheelbarrow in front of her, running around, and it would be full of compost or full of soil bags or full of something, and she would be dumping it somewhere, so she would be creating a new garden. And she would take you around that whole garden and explain to you the kind of vegetables that people would grow, all sorts of different things.